for the department to suddenly deal with this matter with the urgency that it has always deserved?
Not really. There's a plan which we had been using to roll out school infrastructure in the country, focusing on water and sanitation, electricity and other things. And that plan is still in place. What has emerged, though, is a need for us to reflect on that plan, to ask whether that plan is working and whether it's meeting the increasing demand for education in this country, and whether the resources that we have are sufficient to address all the challenges and the demands that are there right now.
Well, one would have thought that you already have those answers. In other words, you know exactly what the backlog is and how much it's going to cost to actually address those backlogs. And when a question comes from a new president about why children keep on dying and this issue has not been dealt with, that by now you would have answers ready. If it's money, you would say, we need so many billions to address this. If it's personnel or technical competency, you'd be able to say, we need these kinds of skills to be able to address this right now. Why is that not there?
No.
If there is a plan already, as you are saying, as the minister also said.
No, we know there's a plan. One of the big problems is money. For example, she said today that Limpopo alone, to eradicate all the infrastructure challenges there, you need about 3 billion rand, and yet its annual budget is 1 billion rand, which means money is what you need to solve all the problems, because when you have the money, then you can bring in the capacity to be able to deal with all those challenges that you're talking about.
Say we accept then what you are saying, right? Why then do we need new timelines over the next 3 months? This is what we need to do. Because that answer, if that answer is readily available from a plan that already exists, someone or the minister ought to have said, hang on, Mr. President, we have the answer to your question. We need so many billion rand, and that is what is the holdup. Instead of saying we're going to do an audit and then come to, with a plan within the next 3 months and so on. Because then it makes it difficult to believe that you have a plan if you don't have readily available answers.
I can send it to you now. You can probably receive it on your laptop and project it so that you can see the progress that we've made. The plan is there. That's why the minister said we are not going to wait for 3 months. We'll have that report, that rapid audit, to be done and presented to her in 10 days, which means the information is there, the plan is there, the costs are there. All that we need now is to work on an emergency plan that needs to be implemented right now as per the President's directive, because he also needs to satisfy himself that indeed work has been done, what the backlogs are and what is required for him. But in the sector, we have been doing that work, and every province has been doing that work, and the progress is there, and it's just a matter of whether it was fast enough. Which is what we need to do now, and also to reprioritize some of the funding that we have now towards this particular function away from other programs.
Now, if all of this was already known, what then was the point of holding this emergency meeting with, with the MECs from the 9 provinces?
The point was that the minister every year at the beginning of the year, she would go to provinces and remind them to say, guys, remember, you are tasked with delivering school infrastructure. Please make sure that you prioritize water, you prioritize sanitation, these toilets. And every time when she gets a report every quarter, she would see that things are not going as fast as they should. And that provinces also needed to prioritize funding towards eradicating these toilets. So this meeting was to again reactivate people to come up with a sector response to what the President has asked for, but also to come up with an emergency plan that everyone will buy into, to make sure that all provinces move at the same pace to address the emergency that we are dealing with right now.
Now, take us into that room. What were the issues that the MECs specifically were putting on the table?
The issue of funding is a challenge for all of them. Some of them have already overspent their budgets. And you have Eastern Cape, for example, who have the biggest problems in terms of school infrastructure, with the largest number of schools that still have pit latrines. When they look at their money, it's not enough to solve all the problems, but again, progress is there. But they also talk about capacity in terms of human resources, saying that the infrastructure unit does not have the requisite teams of people, also because they cannot afford to pay the salaries that private sector is paying. So you need to compete with them, but things have improved because in the past 2-3 years, they've been able to commit infrastructure funding, and the spending pattern is showing an upward trend, meaning that they're able to spend whatever they're given, which means they're starting to eradicate the pit toilets that are there at a much faster pace than it used to be before.
Were those sort of called explanations, if you like, accepted by the minister, that those were indeed the only challenges facing a province like the Eastern Cape, for example?
Well, she did not accept some of the explanations because she felt it wasn't good enough and that people needed to go back and reflect on the work that they were doing. Because also when you look at funding for school maintenance, there were discrepancies in terms of what some of the provinces were doing. And she said it is important that people need to prioritize accordingly, taking into account that school infrastructure is basic. Learning and teaching cannot happen if the environment is not conducive for such to take place. We need to make sure that all our schools have toilets, proper toilets, age-appropriate, fit for purpose. Where these have been delivered, the old ones need to be demolished, because that's the other problem that we've had to deal with, where a new school is built, new toilets are put, flushing with water, but the school makes a request that the old ones need to be kept in place. To the extent that in July 2016, the DG sent a circular to all our schools, to service providers, instructing them that they needed to make sure that whether the school makes that request or not, the old structure needs to be demolished. That having been said and done, you still have some schools in the Eastern Cape, 37 of them, which still do not have any toilets whatsoever. But the MEC did say there's a plan to eradicate those, and he did update CEM today that there will be service providers who are going to be appointed, and they will be starting that work to make sure that those schools are also provided for.
Which then suggests that in provinces like the Eastern Cape, or in the Eastern Cape province in particular, the problem may well have to do with money and capacity and all those things, but there are problems that are of the provincial administration's own making. Would it be correct to assume that?
It could be correct, but also the fact that Eastern Cape inherited the biggest problems in terms of what had happened before this current MEC, or even before this administration, because the eastern part of the Eastern Cape, for example, the former Transkei, had no school which had been properly built by a government. It was mostly mud schools. That's why the largest number of mud schools were in that part of the country. That's why right now, of the 192 schools that we've built, brand new, 141 are in that part of the country, where mud schools have since been replaced, and the proper facilities for grade R have been built and demarcated appropriately so that they are far away from the kids who are older than them. So those structures are there, but yet the challenge remains. I mean, if you go there, you still find mud schools today. So it just shows the extent of the problem that we've had to deal with.
Mr. Mahlangu, thanks very much for coming through.
Thank you.
He is, of course, the spokesperson for the National Ministry of Basic Education.